So I graduated in May from Rampo College, and I am now stepping out into the real world of graphic design. I'm working with some very talented recruiters and kind of in limbo right now, which is a very scary place to be. But, I'm kind of excited for what the future holds. What advice would you give to an entry-level designer when trying to land their first, real job and get their foot in the door in the big leagues, so to speak?
Um, okay, my first advice is, uh, I mean, you should aim high, but kind of work, but kind of work your strategy up from the bottom. That's what I would do.
Right.
This is really specific advice. I mean, what I would do is, if you know anyone that has a job at a place that you think is interesting, if you know anyone who has a job, start with them. Like someone who graduated last year from your school, someone
Right.
who's graduated from your class from your school. They're sort of your first step into things. I think people just sort of like get it in their heads that they're cheating themselves or they're not ambitious enough if they don't kind of call up, if they don't start with the list of AIJ medalists and work down from there. But that's not how I got the job with Massimo Vignelli. I got the job with Massimo Vignelli because I had an internship, and the guy that I worked with directly at that internship, not the boss, but the guy who was like my direct supervisor,
Right.
who had graduated from school himself maybe 3-4 years ago, had a classmate who had graduated with him 3-4 years ago and who had just gotten a job at Vignelli Associates in New York. And so I was going to New York, and this guy I worked for, Tom, said, hey, why don't you look up my friend Peter? If you're down in New York, he just got this job at Vignelli. And so that's how I got in there. And I wasn't even saying, can you introduce me to Massimo Vignelli, or I'm looking for a job. I just wanted to sort of like see what the inside of that office looked like. So I
Right.
was kind of like going in without any particular agenda.
Yeah.
And I just loved, again, I loved doing that just because I loved kind of like seeing where people worked, and I just thought it was all fascinating.
Right.
And I never sort of like viewed, any of those encounters or interviews as sort of like oh my God, this is like the big interview that's going to make or break my career. To me, it was just
Right.
fun. It's like tourism for me, sort of.
Yeah, yeah. I agree.
And
I agree with
and
that.
by the way, I was doing this at a moment in time in the early '80s where there was a terrible economic recession going on. The economy was, crummier, as crummy as it's ever been. And the field itself was much, much smaller. I mean, you actually could get you could get the names of every single kind of decent graphic design company in New York on typewritten on one side of a piece of paper, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a small field, and on top of that, it was completely baffling because there was no internet, obviously, so your ability to research any of these places was almost non-existent. You couldn't go online and see what kind of work they did at a place like Gottschalk and Ash, let's say,
Yeah.
and even I can't remember how I knew what I knew about Massimo Vignelli going to school in
Right.
Cincinnati, Ohio, without any internet, without anything else, right? Just was, stuff in books and magazines, and there were darn few of those back then. So I think, to me, I think it's a matter of just letting your enthusiasm and interest and curiosity be your guide. It works when you're, like I said, same advice I gave really for being a good designer.
Right.
I think the same thing somehow pertains when you're looking for a job. If you sort of like get fixated on one place and say that's the place I really want to work at, chances are it's not going to work out. It's going to work out for me. The place I really wanted to work at was Shermarth and Geismar, actually. That was my favorite design firm in New York.
They're great.
Nothing against Vignelli Associates, but it was Shermarth and Geismar where I really sort of like, they represented kind of like my idea of what design was all about. And I dropped off my portfolio. I picked it up. There was a nice note inside. But it was sort of like nice to see your portfolio. Go away, kid.
Yeah.
Better luck next time.
It's
And
nice
so,
just to get a response sometimes too.
yeah, I know. Yeah. Meanwhile, my wife, who in the same period, my wife, who's not a designer, who had an MBA, was looking for a job, and she would just go to the post office with like literally 30 letters at a time, lick the stamps, drop them in the mailbox, wait for a response, and she'd maybe get 5 responses back. 4 of which were form letters saying we have no positions, but thanks for your interest, and then 1 of which might be something. And I can't believe anyone got anything done in those days, licking stamps and waiting for a landline phone was amazing. So, in a way, Rob, you got your work cut out for you. There's like tons of
Yes.
places all over the country, all over the city, all over the world, for that matter,
Yeah.
that are doing really interesting work where you could actually have a blast. And it's just a matter of, you know, not holding your breath. You know, I just, to me,
Yeah.
I would be like a kid in a candy store these days. There'd be so
Yes.
many places that I'd be interested in working, so many places I'd never heard of that I'd even be more excited about. And so I think there's tons of possibilities out there. I think if you just are open-minded and don't worry about kind of like, you know, that big interview with your, you know, with your design hero. That may not be the thing that opens the
Well, that's
door. And,
happening now, so that's
yeah.
I could check that off the bucket list. So
Yeah, but I mean, the
yeah,
people
I hear
that
you.
I have 8 designers that work for me, and every single one of them started at Pentagram as an intern, as a paid intern. Not always on my team, and they didn't. Some of them kind of went from being an intern on my team to being a full-time designer on my team.
Right.
And a lot of those interns are people who, I mean, I usually don't even hire the interns here. You know,
Yeah.
my senior designers will do the interviews, look at the portfolios, and pick who's going to be here for 3 months or 6 months or whatever
Right.
it is. And then sometimes some of those people click, and then they end up here full time, and they end up here for 5 years. And like, you know, and so I've got a fantastic team, and you know, all of them have those characteristics that I described that I admire and I like to see in other people. But I don't think with any of them they ever had like sort of that moment of truth where it was an interview and it's between them and 2 other people and they had to kind of come in. It just was,
Yeah.
these things can happen in mysterious ways without you even noticing, actually.
Yeah, that's cool. And you definitely, indeed, have a very talented design team. Brett
Yeah.
Cobb and all those guys. Those guys are all design heroes of mine, I guess you could say. You know.
Me
But,
too. Me too.